Hi, I'm Anatole, and this is my review of The Crown Season 1, Episode number 5, titled Smoke and Mirrors. It scored 8.6 on IMDb, and that's from 2,600 votes. If you've been following my channel, you know I've been doing reaction videos for The Crown, but due to Tet and coronavirus, the schedule between me and Min has been thrown off a little bit. So that's why I reviewed last episode instead of reaction. That's why I'm going to review this episode instead of reaction. I had already seen the episode before scheduling doing the reaction with Min. Our usual method is I watch the episode, and that way I'm prepared to answer any questions Min has while we review the episode, and then Min does the pure reaction. So unfortunately, because he can't make it for these two episodes, I thought reviewing it is fair for you. Doing a reaction for something I've already seen, I thought probably would not be really fair to advertise it as quote-unquote reaction. So join me after the intro and I will give you my review on The Crown Season 1, Episode 5. Welcome back, and now I'm going to give the plot summary of the episode, courtesy of Wikipedia, and I'm going to give commentary as I do the summary, so I will remark upon each scene that the summary discusses, and then after that I'll give my thoughts on the episode. So, Episode 5, Smoke and Mirrors, directed by Philip Martin and written by Peter Morgan. Peter Morgan, of course, is the creator of the show. And I'm checking now, I think he writes every episode in the season. Yes, he does. All 10 episodes are written by him. The directors change. Have we had Philip Martin? This is the second episode directed by Philip Martin. Philip Martin also directed episode 3, Windsor. Plot summary. Release date November 4th, 2016. Plot summary. While visiting London to spend time with ailing Queen Mary, Edward clashes with Private Secretary Tommy Lascelles after learning he and Wallace have not been invited to attend Elizabeth's coronation. So a couple things there. The first one is Queen Mary died in this episode, and we do get a really nice scene between Mary and Edward when Edward's laying in the bed with Mary, and his mother, tells him, "Don't leave." And the actor, and let me get the name of the actor. The actor is Alex Jennings, plays it very straightforward. So we do get a moment of tenderness, but as usual, that moment is undercut by the letter that he's writing to Wallace Simpson, where he's saying that even though he still has feelings for his mom, there's greater hatred because of how he treated him and Wallace when Edward told his mom Mary about his feelings for Wallace. And the research I did for this episode, I've gotten further into that biography of Elizabeth that I'm reading. I'll link to it in the show notes. I always forget the title, but it was written by the American journalist and it came out about 6 years ago. I've also watched a couple more brief documentaries on Elizabeth, and I almost finished one on Wallace Simpson before recording. I've got 10 minutes left before recording this episode. But something that occurred to me after I recorded my last review, and that's that Edward is written very much in the style of Iago from Othello. And there's the line near the beginning of the play where Iago has a soliloquy to the audience, and he reveals his hand. He says he's going to try to create jealousy between Othello and, I can't remember who is it Desdemona? I believe Othello's romancing Desdemona. But he says that he's going to be a master of intrigue. And from this moment forward, don't believe anything he says because, quote, "I am not what I am," end quote. And it seems to me that they're writing Edward much in the vein of Iago. And that is, when we get one moment of sincerity from Edward, it's always undercut by his cynicism or scheming. Or when we're given a moment of ceremony, that's undercut with Edward's cynical commentary. And we'll see that again later in the episode during Elizabeth's coronation. Yes, during Elizabeth's coronation, we see that he he's given commentary on the coronation, and he's pulling the veil off on the mystery that coronation is meant to create within the viewers. And then the scene between Tommy Lascelles and Edward spares no venom, so that definitely again shows that the price of Edward abdicating is the price of him never being able to be a member of that world that the crown creates, because he will always have people in the court and people in the British public who have vile feelings towards him, antipathy towards him, and even within his own family. Elizabeth, meanwhile, regrets her decision to place Philip in charge of preparations after he upsets her with a request that he should forego kneeling to pay homage when she is crowned, and annoys the committee by insisting they televise the event. Now, this matter of televising the event is very important to the history of the crown. So not only because it was the first time the coronation of the Royal Highness was televised, but many people point to the later attitude of journalists and newspapers and the paparazzi to the royal family as having been changed by Philip in bringing the cameras into the Queen's coronation. That once he invited the press in to this intimate matter of the royal household, it became they felt empowered to draw the veil back on all things regarding the crown. So it became a two-edged sword. Yes, as Philip's argument was that in order to avoid the crown being made obsolete, the people had to feel a stake in the crown. But once they felt that stake, then the royal family never had that mystery protect them, and their private lives became fodder for the journalists. On June 2nd, 1953, Elizabeth is crowned at Westminster Abbey, while Edward and Wallis view the coverage from their Paris villa and spitefully mock her. So two things I want to mention here. First, about the matter of ceremony, and we see time and again that Peter Morgan does not view the ceremonial events of the series in a privileged way, and instead he presents them in the way that the participants would have viewed them itself. So rather than being these sacred events, they're moments of intrigue, and oftentimes the events or occurrences that those ceremonies are meant to elevate, the genuine feeling that they're meant to enshrine has occurred before. When we see the ceremony for the funeral of King George, rather than being presented as a moment of tragedy, instead it gets undercut by the comments of Edward, his snide remarks about all the people in the household. When we have and all those feelings of tragedy already occurred. Peter Morgan already presented those feelings to us by bringing us the viewer directly in the moment where Margaret and the royal household discover the body. And we are also presented with the moment when Elizabeth learns about the death of her father. So by the time we get to the ceremony, all those emotions have been drained out. All that's left now is the scheming. The death of Queen Mary, we've already seen those moments of tenderness between her and her grandchildren and children. Those moments have already shown us, have already presented us with that greater depth of emotion, where we get to see the characters rather than just the place and the responsibility they hold as members of the royal court. So when we get to the ceremony, for Queen Mary, that's the moment where Prince Philip begins discussing his plans for the coronation of Elizabeth, talking about how all these people here, you see them at all the same ceremonies, doing the same things, just the same people, and that's because they're acting out tradition, but that tradition is not keeping up with current events. Rather than making this burial of Mary a moment of grief within the audience, Peter Morgan is using it to present the scheming that goes on underneath, always on underneath. And in that way, it's very Shakespearean. The crowning of Elizabeth is maybe the highlight of the episode. And another part of my research, something I didn't mention, was I've seen almost all of her coronation. You can find it on YouTube. I've gotten almost to about 20 minutes before the ending. We see David breaking down in tears as he's playing the bagpipes. And so Peter Morgan complicates our feelings for David by finally presenting him in a vulnerable way, rather than just being this Shakespearean villain. Now, let me get into the notes I have. Starting with King George, I thought that was a surprise by showing the child Elizabeth, because that scene is later paid off when she's able to help the Archbishop, the one who's presiding over the anointment of her, and she's able, because she remembers practicing that, at least as presented by Peter Morgan, she remembers practicing that with her father. She's able to steady the hand, and that shows her comfort being in that position. Reinforcing the religious authority of the crown. In UK, monarchy binds the church and state together because it's a constitutional monarchy. It has roles within the government, very ceremonial roles, but has roles nonetheless. Elizabeth taking the crown to show Philip reinforces the conflict and the tension between Elizabeth's role as the monarch and her role as a wife. She wants to bring this to her husband. She wants to share this with her husband, but her husband's gone. He's taking flying lessons. And so when she finds him, she says, I want us to spend more time together. And Philip says, we spend all our time together. Elizabeth says, no, we don't. We see there's that difference. They can't even come eye to eye on how close they are together. Elizabeth feels like they never spend any time, but Philip feels suffocated. So for him, it feels like they spend all their time together. When the journalist comes into they describe it as the villa, the Paris villa, Albert takes the journalist up to her room and shows her the last red box he ever had. Before he sits down to show her the red box, he pauses and then very slowly sits down. And I thought that was a really good way of playing up his age. He's not the young man who had the crown, however briefly. He is an older man now, and age is catching up with him. One of the great themes of the episode is the modern versus the traditional. We see that principally with Philip and the conflict that Philip has when he's trying to modernize the coronation ceremony, and he gets pushed back even on that. And there's one thing they only allude to, and that is, but I learned through my research, and that was who the court photographer was going to be. Mother Elizabeth, when she presents her daughter with, well, you can give him some other role. And Elizabeth says, well, like what? And Mother Elizabeth says, well, he could appoint the court photographer. That was actually a point where Mother Elizabeth, Queen Mother, had her own court photographer she wanted to use, one of a more traditional photographer, while Philip had someone he wanted to use. He was more of a modern photographer. When it came to that matter of who the court photographer was going to be, Queen Mother won, not Philip. One bit of writing that I really liked was when Elizabeth is having that conversation with Philip over whether Philip will kneel, and Philip says, are you my wife or are you the queen? And Elizabeth says, I'm both. Again, they are so opposed, their worldviews are so opposed, they can't even agree on their roles within that marriage. And the final shot of Edward on bagpipes was really moving, as it was one of the first moments we had of humanizing that character rather than just him being a two-dimensional anti-hero or antagonist more than anything. And that's it. That's my review of the episode. Please let me know your thoughts on the episode, and I hope you'll join me again. Hopefully next episode it will be a reaction video with me and Min. And until next time, take care and be well. Goodbye.